Welcome to Econ 102, where economist Noah Smith and I make sense of what's happening in the news, technology, business, and beyond through the lens of economics. Let's jump right in.
There is a piece I want to write on crime, and I did not get around to it because events interceded and there were other things I had to write about. But the piece I wanted to write on crime is basically that crime is a bigger problem in America than people realize, and we've just learned to accept it as part of this background of daily life, and that what's going to solve it, obviously not defunding the police is, whatever, but like that'll, and providing good social services and things like that. But that won't get us to the low levels of crime that would actually make urban living possible. And what instead we need is cameras everywhere.
Well, with that as a segue, Garrett, welcome to the podcast.
So now you're
Yeah.
helping me write a post instead of me helping you.
Yeah. Wait,
Sorry.
when does AI come in and just write this for both of us? Like,
Well, let's give a bit of a historical backdrop before we get into how we solve things today. Noah, you've been writing for, blogging for, I want to say almost 15 years or something, ever since you were my TA at Michigan.
Yeah.
You've been sort of covering the world, and of which, crime has been a topic that you've written about occasionally. Let's say that, I was reading your stuff up until, say, 10 years ago, and then I went into a 10-year coma, and I just woke up and was like, hey, how did things evolve? Like what took place in the world of crime and policing? What would you tell me in terms of getting me up to speed in terms of like how things played out?
America is a higher crime country than other countries. And we don't have good ways of comparing property crime across countries because reporting standards are different, because the definitions of crimes are different. So we don't really know whether people are getting whether there's more theft overall in America, or how many more times there is theft overall in America than France, right? Like people may be getting pickpocketed in France, and how do you compare pickpocketing and home invasion, blah, blah, blah. Do people actually report when they get stuff stolen, et cetera, et cetera? And so it's difficult to compare these property crimes. Violent crimes can go underreported. And murder is the easiest way to it's the most serious crime, and it's the crime that always gets reported, and it's a easier way to compare across countries. And when we look at murder rates, we see that America is about 5 times as violent as Europe and about 10 times as violent as Asia.
Garrett, anything you would add to that same question of just like how has the state of play evolved over the past, let's say, decade? What are the biggest things to mention?
I mean, I think for me, and obviously I'm not a police chief. I just spend a lot of time with him. I think the level of sophistication has fundamentally changed. And you've gone from, at least what it felt like when I was a kid, that your average criminal was a juvenile just making a bad decision on a Friday night. You've seen things like organized retail crime skyrocket, and you have companies, like a Walmart posting $1 billion of theft a year. Like those products aren't being used at home; they're being resold on Facebook Marketplace in very sophisticated organizations. Or like I had a recent situation with one of our healthcare partners. And you had a South American gang, paying hourly janitorial workers to steal bone marrow transplants. And these are about the size of a toothpaste tube, $10,000 a pop. And they had stolen $4.5 million from one hospital system to then go resell it into third world countries. Like that is very sophisticated. And like that is what, to Noah's point, like that is what we're seeing happen. It's a very profitable business to be in right now.
How much of this organized crime is foreign actors, and where are they typically coming from versus like gangs versus I don't know mafia activity? Like break down a little bit to some extent the sort of the level of organized crime.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, I can't speak for the entirety of the country, but they tend to focus on areas they're good. So you've got these groups from Eastern Europe. They'll come in. This is pretty clever, right? They'll call you, Erik. You're running maybe a distribution company. You're a freight forwarder. They'll buy your legitimate business, and then they will take all of your jobs and steal all of the 20-foot trucks. Just steal them. And then after a few months, when things get hot, they just shut the business off and walk away. Incredibly difficult to track, pretty sophisticated in terms of their ability to go in and actually buy the company legally. You feel good. You're like, I sold this company, this nice guy. You have no idea. And then the other parts of the ecosystem have no idea. And that's very different than maybe a South American gang who's going to come in and they'll retrofit some drones. They'll use this to go scope out houses, to go scope out parking lots. and use that kind of as like a forward deployed look at what's happening, whether they're stealing guns or stealing drugs. So I see both every day, but that's where most of the crime is coming from.
Yeah. And Noah, help us make sense of the discourse here, because of course there was the Chesa Boudin recall a few years ago, and there were all these concerns about crime, and the arguments that him and supporters of him would give is, hey, you know the stats are down. Like, the stats are, headed in the right direction. It's just the media sensationalizing things. But then, people will say, hey, oh, it's, because of underreporting, or because, or it doesn't, factor in that people feel less safe. And that's not just a media sensationalized thing. Help us make sense of what's real versus what's not accounted for in the statistics.
Well, okay, so I think that one thing is that uh, the statistics are correct. The statistics are real. And the way we get good statistics, the way we know this is that we have victimization surveys. We go out and ask people, have you had stuff stolen? And I understand there's a few cases where people can have stuff stolen and not realize it's been stolen ever, and so they say, I haven't been a victim of a crime. But overwhelmingly, people know when their money's been stolen, when they've been punched, especially for violent crime, which is the crime that people care about by far the most. You know, uh, People know when they've been assaulted. People know when they've been shot. People know when, et cetera. And so these victimization surveys show the exact same trends as the official data. So we know that in terms of the direction of the trends, maybe there's some magnitudes. Reporting will change some of the magnitudes, but in terms of the direction of the trends, it's very clear crime is actually falling. That doesn't, but there's two other things that, so it's not fake. Okay, the fallen crime is not fake at all. Okay, there may be some kinds of crimes that have increased because technology has made them easier, but what I'm saying is that overall crime is down. It really is down, and we know this because we just ask people. Um, and so, however, that doesn't solve the problem for two reasons. Number one, um, our baseline crime is so much higher than other countries that even if crime goes down, we have this baseline level of crime that we've had for essentially the entire history of our country that has made our cities unsafe, and that makes us feel unsafe about living in cities, and that distorts our life in all sorts of ways that we've learned to take for granted, such as forcing people out to the suburbs, and such as making people, if you say the inner city in Japan, that's like the best place to go. The inner city in Japan is Shibuya or something like that. Like, that's where you want to go. You want to go to the inner city. And so that's a very different way that we live compared to people in other countries, compared to people in like Paris. I was just in the inner city of Paris, which is very nice. The bad parts of Paris are like suburbs. So there's certain suburbs that are considered worse places, called banlieues, but then, and I mispronounced that. But then um but so the baseline background level of crime that we've learned to accept in America, that we never really had. Even in the 1950s, basically, we had banlieues in the 1950s. We had places you weren't supposed to go. In the 1960s, my dad worked as a construction worker in East St. Louis, and he would go out there, and everyone either had friends and family members who were murdered, or my dad's best friend on the construction job had killed someone, and the police ignored it. And so you had that situation in America since time immemorial. You had danger, and of course, in the old days, in like the 1920s, most people were so poor that baseline level of violence was like a secondary problem. But now we've eliminated that baseline level of violence in much of Europe and Asia, and we haven't in America. And so instead, what we've done is we've suburbanized ourselves in response. The second problem is that so we've gone to such huge uh, lengths to insulate ourselves from crime, to mitigate crime, the impact of potential crime on us, that we've driven rates down only by rearranging our entire lives. Right? We've moved out of the inner cities. We've spent our lives like locking up our houses and installing security systems and watching who we interact with on the street, and all these ways in which crime, uh we restructure our daily lives around preventing crime. in ways that make our lives worse that actually make crime rates go down. We're making crime rate. When you lock up your house with an effective security system, you're making crime rates go down, but you had to lock up your house. When you move out to the suburbs because the city's too violent, you made the rate of crime go down, but it didn't make life better. We know that the exurban living makes people unhappy. Long commutes especially make people unhappy. And um, so mitigation strategies are not measured in crime rates, and yet they represent a real cost that we pay to reduce crime rates. And even so, we've not reduced crime rates to anything approximating a European, or to say nothing of an Asian country. Crime is still this giant problem in America, this baseline problem that we've learned to live with forever, that we don't actually need to live with if we can find technological solutions. And the only technological solution I can think of is cameras everywhere.
Hence flock.
And Slough. Let's do
Garrett,
it.
is this
But
something
I think Noah, to your point, like I had this interesting conversation with a mayor of a major city, right? And he was being congratulated because I think homicides were down like 50% year over year, right? And he said, yes, but 2 people still died every week in my city. Why are we clapping ourselves patting ourselves on the back? Like 2 people died every week in our city for avoidable reasons. Like this
Right.
isn't like, oh, it was cancer or it was a heart attack. It was like, no, someone shot someone else. Like, and I think that's where at least we sit, where I sit is like any level of homicide is an unacceptable level. Any level of a violent crime where your victim is just too high. Uh, and yeah, it's going down, but to your point, the baseline is just so high to begin with, and yeah, it's a difficult topic.
We'll continue our interview in a moment after a word from our sponsors. Hey everyone, make sure to check out the show notes for today's Econ 102 episode. We've organized all the key insights from Noah's rants into an easy-to-scan cheat sheet format. Our show notes were actually created by Notion's AI meeting notes. It listened to our entire podcast episode, captured a full transcript, and generated a recap of the episode's meaningful takeaways. If you're someone who takes messy notes, forgets what was said in back-to-back meetings all day, or listen to one too many podcasts, you've got to try this feature. And because AI meeting notes lives right in Notion, everything you capture, whether that's meetings, podcasts, interviews, conversations, live exactly where you plan, build, and get things done. No switching, no slowdown. Here's an exclusive offer for our listeners. Head to the link in our show notes to try Notion's AI meeting notes free for 30 days. Every business is asking the same question. How can we make AI work for us? The possibilities are endless, and guessing is too risky. But sitting on the sidelines isn't an option, because one thing is almost certain: your competitors are already making their move. No more waiting. With NetSuite by Oracle, you can put AI to work today. NetSuite is the #1 AI cloud ERP trusted by over 43,000 businesses. It's a united suite that brings your financials, inventory, commerce, HR, and CRM into a single source of truth. That connected data is what makes your AI smarter, so it doesn't just guess. It knows and can intelligently automate routine tasks, deliver actionable insights, and help you cut costs and make fast-powered AI decisions with confidence. This isn't another bolted-on tool. It's AI built on the systems that run your business. Whether your company earns millions or even hundreds of millions, NetSuite helps you stay ahead of the pack. If I needed this product, it's what I'd use. Right now, get our free business guide, Demystifying AI, at netsuite.com/102. The guide is free for you at netsuite.com/102. netsuite.com/102.
Yeah.
Noah, what are European or Asian countries doing like that is more effective than what we're doing? Or put differently, why are our crime rates so much higher?
A number of reasons. One reason our crime rates are higher is because we're more spread out. And so in Asian European countries, the police walk around. The police can't walk around American cities because they're too suburbanized. The police have to drive around, and driving around isn't the same deterrent as walking on the street. We have lots of evidence that foot patrols are very effective and for many reasons. I could go on and on and on. There's many reasons why having police walk around instead of drive around is good. So that's another reason is because we have not made the large investments in order to shift culture in high crime neighborhoods in America. We have not made the investment required to shift culture from when someone threatens you, you shoot them, to when someone threatens you, you call the cops. And Steve Pinker writes about this in his book, The Better Angel of Our Nature. It's very important. It's this transition that it's essentially it's civilization. You could even call it civilization, where in like a typical American neighborhood, if someone is getting crazy, threatening you, whatever, you don't pull out your gun and shoot them. You call the cops. But that was not always true. You go back to like the 1800s, and someone's threatening you, you do not call the police. You shoot them because everyone has a gun in their house. Everyone's like the defender of their house, right? And you just shoot them. And so then that's what you would do in the frontier. And so we haven't made those investments to basically let people know you can always call the cops. The cops are your friend. The cops are on your side. This is a civilized nation where you can always just call the cops. And when you do, you get a big reduction in crime. But I think also the fact that cops can't walk around. Everyone talks about guns, guns, guns. Americans have more guns, blah blah blah. But when you look at it, this actually makes a difference. Like flooding the country with guns actually makes about, I think, from the research I've seen, it makes about a 2x difference. So we could actually drop crime by 2x by basically just getting rid of all guns. But that's really, really hard to do. And it would not even get us close to where Europe is now. Like we're 5x greater than Europe in terms of murder rates. Getting rid of all the guns, which would be insanely hard, require this giant change in our culture, and would probably be declared unconstitutional, would get us halfway. Halfway would get it's you can't say that. It would get us like, a 2x change when we need a 5x change. And so we need a bigger change. We do need the investments in policing, to make everyone realize and call the cops. But in the meantime, what we need is cameras everywhere. So people, because there's also research showing that really, people aren't deterred by horrifying punishments. They aren't deterred by the specter of the electric chair or life in prison or, being drawn and quartered, right? What they're deterred by is the likelihood of getting caught. When you increase the likelihood of getting caught, even if your punishment's just a slap on the wrist, we focus on the severity of punishment because we read the news and we're angry that someone got away with murder or got away with assault or something like that. We're mad. We think they deserve more punishment. Fine. I can't tell you people don't deserve more punishment, but it's not going to reduce crime rates to amp up the horrible punishments, right? We can torture people to death in the street, and other criminals will just go like, ha ha ha, look at that guy getting tortured to death in the street, and then go commit some crimes. And so then, we have lots of literature, lots of empirical confirmation of the fact that severity of punishments doesn't really register on people who don't think they're going to get caught. So catch people. The way you catch people is having them on camera. If people know they're on camera, if everyone just knows that if you commit a crime, there will be a public record of you having committed that crime. And then the authorities can just catch you. Maybe in some places like progressive DAs and permissive judges and whatever will let people off, and but people won't really feel confident that will remain. But permissiveness can only go so far. People commit crimes because they think nobody's watching them. And you make someone watching them, I don't think people are going to commit crimes. We have lots of evidence on the likelihood of getting caught being an effective deterrent to crime.
Yeah. No, that's well said. Slate Star Codex has a really great long piece on just that exact aspect. Now, some people listening, we're obviously believers in what you just said. That hence our partnership with Flock. But what do you say to critics who say something like, "Hey, is there something if there are cameras everywhere, are there sort of second order effects that we might not like, or we don't want to enter this kind of surveillance state?" People use that term. Are there downsides to cameras everywhere? And, what might we say? Is that just a worthy, a trade-off that we need to make?
Americans live in fear of crime, and we have the potential to stop them from living in fear of crime. A country that has made this trade-off is Japan. So people think of Japan as this ultra-safe place. When I lived in Japan in the mid-2000s, and when I saw a car bombing, or the aftermath of a car bombing, the building next to me was burned down for arson. After the Yakuza nicely evacuated us, we saw people getting beat in the street. My roommate was kicked over on her bike by a guy who just saw her walking by and kicked her over. My favorite club was closed down for murder. Someone got stabbed and shoved into the pool. And then my other roommate was dating the bouncer of that club, who had beaten up a whole bunch of people who got rowdy. But if you look at the crime rates, the murder rates, any crime rates, it was a lot higher than it is now. Japan has had something like a 5x decrease in crime. And the baseline level was so much lower than us, and we didn't start going to Japan in large numbers until this had already happened, until the cameras were already everywhere. right? Until so Japan put cameras everywhere. That's what happened. There's cameras everywhere in Japan. You can't. So I used to ask Japanese people, have you shoplifted? So in Japan, my bike constantly got stolen. And then I was like, why are people always stealing my bike? And then people are like, it's just a bike, man. That was their response. It's like, it's not theft. It's a bike. Like, what? And so but people were just like, I need a bike. There's a bike. There's no chain on that bike because the bikes all come with this auto lock. And if you really don't want your bike to be stolen, you install a chain. And then people won't steal it because nobody bothers to go around with clippers because bikes are so plentiful you can't make much money to chop shop. But if you just have the regular lock on your bike, people in Osaka would just steal bikes. Now even today you talk to Japanese people, it's different now actually because of cameras. But today you talk to Japanese people oh yeah, your bike's gonna get stolen in Osaka. You just buy another bike. It's oops, $50. You buy another bike. And so it happens every few months. And and people are like, it's just a bike, man. And so, but people don't Japan is, of course, a much lower crime place than America, but we've never really paid attention to the changes in crime that have gone on in Japan because it was already so low, but it was cameras. Cameras everywhere in Japan reduced crime. And I talk to people, who hang out with Yakuza people or whatever. And they're like, you can't commit crimes. There's cameras everywhere. Right. And so actually now, some kinds of crime are increasing in Japan. You've got gangs of Japanese guys, local Japanese guys knocking over Apple stores. You had that. And you've got guys knocking over stores. You used to have this thing called oyajigari, which was basically young guys go beat up old guys for cash and mug them. It's mugging, you know, but it's specifically mugging of old men. You'd mug old men for money. That doesn't exist anymore because of cameras. And they caught the Apple theft guys too, I think. And so the police, are now collaborating with the store owners, which they didn't even before. Anyway, I guess the point is that Japan managed to reduce crime a lot too with cameras. And if you look at every country in the world is doing this. So if you look at the Middle East, they're going to install cameras everywhere. Southeast Asia, cameras everywhere. You're going to see crime rates continue to go down there because the technology exists and because society permits it. And people in Japan complain. People are like, oh yeah, we're a surveillance state now, man. They can just know everything about us. Japan hates being, Japan loves privacy. Japan doesn't like being a surveillance state. Japanese people resisted even getting social security numbers for a long time. People didn't want to get social security numbers because they thought it would let the government track them. People in Japan are pretty libertarian. But I would say, I would argue the average Japanese person is more libertarian than the average American in terms of their ideology, what they believe people should be able to do on their own. They didn't want social security numbers. They believe more strongly than we do in freedom of speech. But at the same time, but at the same time, they're much less likely to riot in the streets over security cameras everywhere. Oh, I don't know. Are people going to riot in the streets over security cameras everywhere? I don't think they are. I think some people are going to smash security cameras. You're going to get anarchist punk kids in America smashing security cameras everywhere. Right. And then you arrest the anarchist punk kids and you're like, oh, guess you don't get to be a humanities major at Oberlin now because you got to do a year in jail. You smash the security camera, son. And then people are going to be like, oh, I guess I can't do that. Instead, we'll just go spray paint something. And then the security cameras will catch you spray painting it. And then the Wild West of America will be tamed. And will something valuable and interesting and fun go out of the world as a result of that? Yes, it will. You will make the world a more boring place. You will take, the world needs some element of chaos, some element of wildness, some element of unrestrained freedom. This is it's an anti-libertarian technology that will make us more controlled and will give, oppressive governments the ability to hijack the system to just big brother us whenever they want. Oh, are you an illegal immigrant? Well, oh, guess what? We caught you on camera. Yeah, that's going to happen. Right. But that's a price that people will be willing to pay. And that we're going to have to, evolve other mechanisms to defend our fundamental freedoms other than simply there's no cameras around. Nobody, I exercised my freedom to run around and behave badly because no one was watching me. That's a natural guarantor of freedom, but it's going to need to go away and be replaced with social guarantors of freedom. We're going to need to say, okay, you actually can't arrest people for this, even though they did it. You can't arrest people. You have to go through procedures of blah, blah, blah. You can't just, So we're going to have to evolve those kind of procedures, and when security camera evidence will be admissible in court will be contested, things like that. And we could become, we could become a dystopian state. Like, I think that could happen. But I don't really think that the availability of cameras is going to be the biggest constraint, is going to be a significant constraint on that. I think a dystopian state could certainly hijack the security camera system for evil purposes, but they're going to get much more out of your phone, right? The dystopian surveillance system is going to get much more out of tracking your phone than it will out of looking at you on cameras. Okay. And so,
Your,
and
your
that,
phone
and
and your
that phone
credit card.
technology is already
Yeah.
there. It's already in our pocket.
We'll continue our interview in a moment after a word from our sponsors.
If you're a small business owner, you know how messy finances can get. A bank account here, an invoicing app there, tax spreadsheets somewhere else. And before you know it, you're juggling half a dozen tools and still feeling behind. That's exactly why there's Found. Found eliminates the clutter by giving you one platform that handles it all. Banking, bookkeeping, invoices, and taxes. No more paying for multiple subscriptions or trying to make outdated apps work together. Found reimagines what business banking should be by putting everything, expense tracking, tax estimates, invoicing, and contractor payments, right inside your business checking account. It's the kind of tool that makes you wonder how anyone managed their business finances without it. Found brings everything together so you can actually stay on top of things instead of constantly catching up. Take back control of your business today. Open a Found account for free at found.com. That's FOUND.com. Found is a financial technology company, not a bank. Banking services are provided by Lead Bank, member FDIC. Join the hundreds of thousands who've already streamlined their finances with Found.
Garrett, no, that was a great exposition. Garrett, what are some reflections from it?
Yeah, I mean, I think going back to the original premise, like people want to jump to let's just punish people and that will teach them. But if we look at our kids as a proxy, like the level of punishment, whether you're in timeout for 5 minutes or an hour, doesn't matter to a 5-year-old. They do something because they think they're going to get away with it, and as soon as they find out that as a parent you know have all seeing eyes, they stop doing bad things, and the punishment has nothing to do with it. And maybe it's unfair to call an adult a 5-year-old, but that's generally how our brain works. We operate on a Boolean equation of like, I get away with this, so I do it. If I don't think I get away with it, I don't do it. And maybe, one is stealing, a gummy from a jar of candy, another one is shooting someone. So quite a big disparity there, but it's the same brain that's making a decision. So totally agree with Noah. And I think the data is there. And I think maybe where Noah and I disagree a little bit is I have a lot less anxiety on the downsides. I think, of course, there's always downsides in everything. But I think where Noah was going near the end is if your concern at a macro level is a oppressive state arising in America, like cameras are not the problem. The problem is that you believe that's going to happen, and there's like 7,000 other ways that could occur. But
Wait,
cameras
I completely
are
agree
part of
with
it.
that. And that's why
Okay.
I also don't have anxiety about cameras.
Yeah, cameras are like not like there's another point that I think Noah that I've seen is because we work in a lot of cities, and cities that have a lot of questions about Flock's technology ask those questions from a lack of trust with their local government to begin with. And so we are just exposing that lack of trust, that you don't believe your local government has your best interest in mind, that they have some alternative motive for you as a resident or as a city, and that might be at the federal or local level. And in places where we see wide support and in fact quite an embrace is where the constituent believes my mayor, my governor, my elected officials want me to be successful in life. They want me to have the American dream. And this is an extension of their ability to help deliver that for me.
Right.
And so I always push on like, you're not mad at the camera. You're mad at this third party that you believe is out to get you. And I'm looking at it going, I want my kids to be able to have a great life. And if they're afraid of being a victim of crime, they're not going to have a great life. Just like I need grocery stores in my neighborhood and I need a roof over their head. And like if I can deliver those three things as a parent, your kids are going to have everything they should need to be successful in life. And completely agree to Noah's point that like if you're worried about the dystopian state, we should get rid of cell phones and credit cards and the internet. Because I can tell you way more about a person from their online behavior than anything they do in physical life. Because I am
100%.
so boring
100%.
physically. I sit at home 12 hours a day. Online, huge wide open world.
The danger of surveillance state is that our politics will be bad, which I'm very worried about. I am worried about a dystopia. I'm worried about our government becoming thuggish and authoritarian. I'm not worried that having cameras everywhere will significantly change the equation in terms of whether or not our government is able to do that. It already is. It already can. We've already got Big Brother technology in place, and cameras will be only a tiny piece of that. Well, I think the biggest downside to cameras everywhere, if I had to say it, is cultural. I think that the culture of wildness and, chaos and personal independence that thrived in America since the first days of colonization, the first days of settlement. Like that was a special part of our culture. There was this wildness and freedom inherent in the ability to run around and have no one see you and have no one catch you doing stuff that was kind of cool. And it's not worth having a high murder rate and a high rate of muggings and a high rate, it's not worth living in fear to have that culture of wild unrestrainedness, right? The wildness of the Wild West is cool. That's why we make westerns about it. Right? Like we like it. We like this freedom. We like this idea that you can just like roll into town like, like with a big iron on your hip and like, that's it's cool. It's romantic. And a little bit of that romance of that Wild West remained in the sort of anarchist punk culture of especially the West Coast in
Mhm.
America.
Well,
And
I will take the
No, no,
trade-off. I'll take the trade-off that I could see,
yeah.
Marty Supreme the movie and get my, crime fantasies, via television and, have our kids just,
Yeah.
walk safe at night.
You want to hear a funny story? Do we have time for a funny story?
Sure, go for it.
All right. So one time this is many years ago, like I don't even remember. I was like, must have been in college, and I posted a personals ad on Craigslist personals. This is before even uh OkCupid. And so I posted a personals ad on Craigslist personals, some silly thing. We're seeing who could post the silliest personals ad. Not even important. But what happened is that some anarchist punk girl responded to my personals ad and wanted me to come on a date with her to do crimes. She wanted me to spray paint anarchist slogans on buildings and post illegal anarchist flyers in buildings, breaking into corporate places like corporate the parks or whatever, basically breaking into corporate things, spraying anarchist things and posting anarchist literature on things.
did you
I
go?
was like, um, I think the statute of limitations is over. I can tell you that I did a little bit of it. And then I was like, all right, well, like this date isn't really progressing to like second base as it were. So I'm gonna abandon this. I just vanished. I Irish exited that date, and just left. I was like, but I did do a little anarchist graffitiing with that girl. And that was one of the more fun dates I've had, possibly not romantic and as such. But then anyway, that happened. That was fun, but it's a society where people could do that, a little bit of that for fun is not necessarily worth a society. Oh, and when I was at Stanford, we broke into the dish. We climbed on the dish, and my RA, my in my freshman dorm led us to do that. He's like, RAs usually will police you. He's like, no, we're gonna do breaking and entering today. He was for my birthday. He was like, let's do a birthday for Noah. That guy's I think he's now head of research at one of those famous biotech companies. Took me to go breaking and entering for my birthday. That was cool, and we can all tell fun stories like that, and security cameras will sort of drive a lot of this out of the world. But it's not that's the worst thing that will happen from security
Y-
cameras, but it's the price I'll be willing to pay to civilize our still uncivilized society.
Yeah, and I think Noah too. To your point, it sounds like we all might have graduated college roughly around the same time. I gotta imagine too. Like I mostly matriculated through college without social media and without smartphones with cameras. And so the things you just did in college were different than I would ever think about doing today when everything I do is going to show up on Instagram, Snapchat, pick your social media of choice forever. Like it's not even
Right,
just the camera. It is in those cases, it's a camera in your pocket. That is, I think, I have to imagine has changed how I would think about 4 years of college. Like
right.
you're gonna do less dumb stuff.
And you don't have those big so only at a few schools do you have, like, people running around naked, like those giant naked runs that they
Yeah.
still have it at Harvard, at
I think it's at
Berkeley.
UCLA, right? Something like that.
UCLA used to. I
Yeah.
think they shut theirs down, right?
Too much fun.
too much fun, but no, too much amateur porn. Like people would come out with cell phone cameras, take pictures of them people and post it on like porn sites and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so I think actually at Harvard people solved this by just looking bad. So nobody wanted to post them.
No one
But
wanted to post it online.
yeah, and Berkeley, the people at Harvard and Berkeley just solved this by like not looking very good. But um anyway, yeah, so though that took some wildness out of the world. Michigan specifically got rid of their naked run. Um
Yeah. No,
because
I'm curious though, you had mentioned, um, like, for those that are worried of the trade-off, what would you propose those people do? Because I agree with you that, like, the trade-off to me seems abundantly obvious that less crime is good, and that we should put more trust into the system and or more accountability into the system. But, like, do you have a point of view of if you were, mayor of said town, governor of said, state, what you'd be doing, to prevent some of the downsides of a world full of cameras?
to prevent some of the downsides of a world full of cameras, um, no, there's nothing we can do. That the wildness will go out of the world. That we will plow and fence our cattle range. Like uh, the wildness
That's already
continually goes out
happened,
of the
right? No, like Gen Z doesn't have sex, they don't
They
drink, they
don't
don't do
yeah,
alcohol, yeah, they
yeah,
don't get in trouble.
yeah,
and
it's already happened, right?
there will still be a frontier. The thing is, if you want the wildness, you will have to go find it somewhere else, right? You go find it. There will be places in the world that will still be somewhat wild. You go to like, rural India or something and you'll find wildness. And people who really need that wildness in their life will have to go find it in the frontier. And that's what we've always done. We've always like moved the frontier out. You had to go farther out. Like we got rid of the Wild West. It's really like you don't have gunslingers anymore as much. Not you have essentially no gunslingers now. Even this kind of stuff my dad's construction buddy engaged in. It doesn't really exist anymore. And like people who do murders will not like go like quick draw at each other. They will you drive past people on the street, you pull up to them at an intersection and you shoot them through the window. That's how you kill someone now. Like you see them standing on the street and you drive by them and you gun them down in the street. Like that's how you kill someone and then you run away. Like it's you don't have those gun pistol duels anymore. You don't just like wear an
No,
iron on your
our
hip.
wildness moved digital, as the great quote,
Yeah, I mean,
trigger fingers turn to Twitter finger,
And then you make a really terrible rap song about how you just killed someone or how you're gonna kill them, and it's just really sucky, and, like, no one buys it.
yeah, I think the only other thing that we didn't hit on though, Noah, I guess, and I don't know if you have a strong opinion on this, is what at least we try to articulate to the elected officials that we work with is like the current crime levels are not only bad, they're double bad, because you also have a growing prison population, which is both like very bad for society, but also very expensive. So if you're simply just trying to run a local government, like crime is actually really bad. It's expensive. Uh, an environment full of cameras with no crime actually leads to more economic prosperity. Because a city like San Francisco probably would have could save about $1 billion by our estimate if they could just reduce their crime down to,
Oh,
let's
yeah.
call it like an Asian standard.
So I think realistically, we'll be able to reduce our crime by 60%, I predict.
Oh.
Violent crime, I don't know about property crime. Violent crime property crime, actually, I
I
think
think
will
it'll
go very
it'll go
low.
together. I think it'll go together.
It'll go together, but also I think that other mitigation strategies will be very important for property crime that don't work for violent crime. For example, tracking property. Like if you can just track stolen property, it doesn't pay to steal stuff, right? Or like but then, like white collar crime, there'll be a lot of white collar crime, there'll be a lot of cyber crime, like, so that's another question of that kind of crime. And I don't know about all that, right? Like it's already a lot harder to break into people's houses than it used to be. You can't really steal a car anymore. Like when you steal phones, they'll be tracked. Like stuff like that will all be important in addition to cameras, right? Like cameras aren't the only thing for property crime, but for violent crime, I think we can get it 60% down, and 60% decrease in violent crime from the previous minimum, right? I think we're now at a minimum of violent crime. This is as safe as we've been since this and like 2014 are the safest we've been since like 1960, like late 50s. I think in 1960, which was like our heyday of safety when we imagined like these white picket fences, blah 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 in America. That time was the safest we've ever been, except for now. Like we're as safe now as we were then, and so that just wasn't as safe as we think, because like the advertisements, from the 1950s didn't have like East St. Louis in them. Okay, they didn't have the bad neighborhoods in them. Just like you look at advertisements for Paris, and they don't show you the banlieues of Paris, right? But that these suburbs where nobody goes, and so like that's what we had in the 50s, and we're basically back there. But we can go a lot lower. We can go 60% lower. We can have a transformative impact. We can make America as peaceful as London is now. Okay. And London now is not the most peaceful city in the world. Like, people still get beaten up and knifed and whatever in London sometimes, but it's peaceful enough that like everyone walks around, everyone takes the train, everyone lives near the middle of the city. And that's how peaceful we can get America, I think.
So Garrett, on the local government side, obviously there's a lot of love for the product. The growth is growing, tremendously. And especially with recent incidents, people see the power of Flock, and they want it. But what's the bottleneck to getting every local government, using Flock? Like, are there any other concerns that you've seen people bring up that we can address?
Yeah, I think this is not, I don't know if this is addressable, Eric, but Noah made a point, maybe we could get a 60%. There are cohorts of America who think we're good enough. Like that actually just this isn't a problem we're solving. And that's just where that's where we disagree. But to the mayor's quote earlier, like, any kid that's killed in his city is
Yeah.
one too many. And I very much subscribe to that mentality of like any level of homicides too high. But there are certain cities, and you can probably pick which ones they are, where they don't think this is a problem. And those cities are also the ones that are going to have declining population, and therefore declining taxes, and therefore increasing crime, and they will down spiral until they realize it is a problem. And then they can call us, and we will happy to come, and we will help get their city back on track. I mean, I remember distinctly when we started the company, we used to joke that Flock would never deploy in San Francisco, because the narrative at the time was that San Francisco didn't have a problem. They didn't want to fix it. We were electing officials who also said that. And then it took a bit of time, right? It took 5 years of kind of really downward spiral and pressure. Every single business left the city by and large, Oakland the same. And now we're trying to fight back up. And it's a lot harder than if they had just stopped it in the first place. But we're going to come no matter what. So no, I think that's the biggest issue is just a difference in what we think success looks like. And I'm closer to Noah, maybe a little bit more aggressive. I think we can do better than 60%, but it's kind of my job to believe we can do more than 60%.
Maybe we can, but I think maybe we can in the long term. I think in the long term we can do better than 60%, but I think it's going to take a lot more than cameras to do better than 60%. But you know what? What I'm saying is that
Yeah.
if you had a 60% reduction in violent crime in America from the low points that we've achieved,
hmm
like 60% from, not from the high
The high, but
highs, but
today.
from the lows, right? If you got us down to like London levels of low violence, you would see a transformative impact on what kind of cities we're able to have, what kind of housing we're able to build, what kind of infrastructure we're able to build, what kind of transit we're able to build. You would see a transformative impact on how Americans live, on the urban environment. And that's, I think, an argument that you guys should deploy more, is urbanism, is the
hmm
idea that once you deploy our stuff, Americans can have walkable cities. You're going to need urbanism as your argument, as your core argument. We need livable cities. We need transit. We need small business. We need walkability. We can get those with these cameras.
Guys, this was a great episode. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast, Garrett.
Yeah. Thank you. No, nice to meet you.
Great to meet you, man.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Econ 102. If you like this episode, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, leave us a rating or review, and share it with your friends and family. For more episodes, go to YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify, and follow us on X at Erik Torenberg and at No Opinion. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.